Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of RPGs with Paddy. I'm Paddy. So after a brief hiatus on the topic, we are back to Cthulhu by Gaslight and it feels great. So we will continue with the last two scenarios of the Golden Dawn. Just before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, and let's get started. So this is the third scenario from The Golden Dawn by Pagan Publishing, and it is the only one set outside of England. As you can probably guess from the name, La Musique de la Nuit, this scenario will take you to Paris, France. Just a quick side note, if you are interested in role-playing cosmic horror in Paris, may I strongly recommend Dreamhounds of Paris by Pelgrane Press. It basically involves the surrealist artists and the dreamlands. It is wonderful, and I will be reviewing it in an upcoming video eventually. But it's for Trail of Cthulhu, not Call of Cthulhu, but the ideas and the themes are very easily adaptable. Oh, and just to remind you, this is set in the 1930s, not Gaslight. It's just because of the Paris setting. But anyway, back to La Musique de la Nuit. It is recommended when you're doing this to have slightly more experienced investigators, but I think it'll be fine even with newer ones. Although having some connection with the Golden Dawn, such as in the previous two adventures, yeah, it can help certainly with the start of the adventure. So I'll just pop up a quick spoiler warning here. So players, stop watching here, and keepers, let's dig into the adventure. So this scenario is based on, as you might have guessed from the title, La Musique de la Nuit, translated to, of course, the music of the night. This is based on the Phantom of the Opera and the famous The Music of the Night. And a key NPC that will join the investigators in parts throughout is Gaston Leroux, who is the author of The Phantom of the Opera and also the author of the excellent locked door mystery The Yellow Room. There is also a link to the story Through the Gates of the Silver Key by H.P. Lovecraft and E. Hoffman Price, and there is also a link to The Music of Eric Zahn by Lovecraft himself. Just one last point that came up during editing. If you're interested in following the story of Eric Zahn a little bit, or a connection to him, check out Zangari's Apostary. This is a third-party producer on the Miskatonic repository. You can find it on Drive-Thru RPG, and I'll probably do a review on it. It's something small that you can add into pretty much any scenario in any time. You don't have to read any of those, but it will help just to give you a bit of background information. The Phantom of the Opera is probably the most useful to either read the book or watch the movie, or if you've been to probably the movie would be better than the live stage performance, because you really want to get a sense of the Place de l'Opéra, the opera house there in Paris. You could do a virtual tour of it as well, just to kind of get an image of it. And there's a pretty good description in the book, but seeing it yourself can definitely help you describe it to the players. So on to the background and the mystery. A denizen of Yadith, who you might read about in Through the Gates of the Silver Key, has crash landed in Paris during an electrical storm. It uses something called a light wave envelope to travel long distances and across possibly time as well, but I think just space. But the machine is broken. It has set up base in the opera house in Paris while it tries to repair its light wave envelope. It's not particularly malicious, but it will kill to keep its secret. It wants to just work on its machine in peace and then get out of there. So if anyone is threatening to reveal it, it will defend itself, kind of. It demands large sums of money set aside for it monthly, and this ties into the whole Phantom of the Opera legend. And in the terms of this scenario, it's not really explained, but presumably he's using that money for parts to repair his machine. It has also taken on an apprentice, Eric Zahn, who plays the viola in the orchestra. And Eric kind of helps out the Phantom in minor ways. Eric, for his part, pretends to be the Phantom so that he can teach his crush, Christine, how to sing. And she thinks this Phantom is the angel of music that her deceased father told her would come and be her guardian angel, kind of thing. So a key element of this story as well is that the Phantom can cast Create Portal, which creates a portal, obviously, through solid objects. It requires a password to even be seen, and it can't be passed through or detected at all without a password. So it's not like you might stumble on it. If you don't know the password, you can't find it, and you will come up against solid matter. If you know the password, then you can see it and you can pass through it. So the Phantom knows all of these because he's made them. Some of them are permanent, some of them are temporary. And Eric Zahn also knows at least some of the passwords because he uses it to kind of sneak into kind of to be around Christine in her dressing room to teach her the music. It's not as lurid as it sounds. So let's get on to the story. How did the investigators get involved? So they will be sent on an errand by the Golden Dawn to go over to Paris to visit Samuel Liddell McGregor Mathers and his wife, Moina. The nature of the errand kind of depends on what the investigators' relationship is with the Order so far. Are they more on... And, of course, there's background information in this book as to the different factions and sides. If they have kind of close ties to Yeats, then maybe they'll be going over to, kind of check out what's going on with Mathers. If they have a bad relationship there, or if they've made other allies, maybe they'll be going over to kind of support Mathers and maybe give him some inside information or something like that. Whatever it is, it's actually not that important. So you'll talk to Mathers and his wife, and then, you can roleplay that, but then he will direct you, okay, it's time for you to go stay at a hotel, but he insists that you meet him for dinner and the opera the following evening. So you can, during the day, you can explore Paris, and there's some interesting information given here, including, I think, the world's largest occult library there that you could go and look at. After that, though, you will go to dinner and meet some other guests of Mathers, notably Gaston Leroux. Make him very, very friendly and really interested in anything the investigators have to say. He has many stories from his experience traveling all over the world and like really genuinely interesting things. So he can trade stories with the investigators, not competitively, but just like in a really kind of creating a good bond there. And he will also ensure that the champagne is flowing freely and will foot the bill as well. As I said, he should be made very friendly because he will be quite an important contact for the rest of the scenario. So know your players and what kind of NPC they like. No, they don't all have to like him, but as long as one person can kind of, get a little bit attached to him. If the players can't warm to him, then he will at least still be fond of them. Even if they have a brash attitude, he can mention something about, that's stiff British upper lip or something like that, just to, but like in a very kind of affectionate way as well, because he really likes them, regardless of how they feel about him. So at the end of dinner, Mathers and his wife decide that they're going to retire for the night and skip the opera. But Gaston insists that you join him at the opera in his private box. There's quite a good description of the opera house here, so give your players a bit of an introduction to it. I would also take a bit of time to relax and mingle in the foyer with some of the NPCs that might come up, and in particular, Colonel Lawrence Taylor and his manservant from India, Rajiv Chowdhury. Maybe LaRue will, introduce the investigators because they are fellow Brits. So Colonel Taylor is English, who was working over in or fighting over in India. But that can be maybe an introduction anyway. This is not suggested in the scenario, but I think it's good foreshadowing. You can have the little chat, but the Colonel will say things that really show his affection for the diva Carlotta. And if anyone at any point during this says anything that could be potentially seen as a slight on either the Colonel or Carlotta, you can have Chowdhury react. So this could be either just like he grasps his fist tightly or something like that, just a small one, and you might need a spot hidden to see that. Or he might actually confront the speaker if you want to be more blatant about it. The Colonel will kind of calm him down and apologize for his servant who grew up on the mean streets of India, saying sometimes he forgets how to act in civilized society. And then he almost mentions something, and he points backwards. There was this one lad, and kind of points backwards, and at that point maybe Chowdhury gives kind of a little bit of a stern look to the Colonel, and the Colonel kind of trails off. I was like, oh no, never mind. Anyway, what were we talking about? So that's just a little bit of foreshadowing that I think you could add in, which is a little bit more show than tell, because it's going to come up later, and rather than just hearing what happened, to kind of get a little bit of the image in the player's head already. So anyway, it's off to Gaston Leroux's box, which is number 4, next to number 5, which is the Phantom's box. So there's a woman waiting outside box number 5, and you can see kind of a few strange things. She's kind of waiting nervously. After hearing a knock from inside, she goes inside, and then she comes back out. And if the players ask anything about the opera house, or even if they don't, LaRue can just start kind of boasting about what a wonderful opera house it is, and it even has its own ghost. And then he can kind of elaborate on that a little bit, and maybe even mention box number 5. Another piece of foreshadowing here is that when the players look out from the box, describe the view a little bit, and definitely kind of subtly describe the ornate chandelier hanging from the ceiling as well, because that's going to come up later. So anyway, the opera will start, and it's a performance of Faust. And at some point during the opera, a body falls from the rafters above the stage and snaps, hanging itself on the support ropes with a sickening snap. A spot hidden from here notices a small piece of fabric falling from the hand of the corpse. So, of course, everyone starts panicking while the managers close off the curtains or drop the curtains and try to make announcements for everyone to stay calm, but it's not working. LaRue is definitely heading towards the stage, and he will encourage the investigators to join him if they're not already, up and ready to go. So backstage, the cast are all murmuring about the murder, and you can pick out the name Joseph Bouquet as the unfortunate stagehand who died. You can probably also hear reference to the opera ghost. You will notice the diva Carlotta is very aggravated, and she says she can't carry on working under these circumstances. And you also see the Colonel is there kind of like trying to calm her and guiding her back to her dressing room. You can choose, the scenario says that his manservant is there with him, but I would say he could be suspiciously absent at this stage, or he could be there but also kind of like looking quite suspicious as well. If an investigator goes up to the catwalk, a spot hidden reveals a bit of fresh mud from where, like looking at the angles, this must be where Bouquet had fallen from. And another spot hidden reveals a pocket watch in the vicinity as well. It has the engraving "For Service and Friendship," LT. So the LT initials. So presumably this is from the kernel, not the kernel's own pocket watch. And although I think in the scenario they mention it being the kernel's pocket watch, but I think it's more likely that it would be the manservant's pocket watch, given from LT, Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence Taylor. And so after that, a halved spot hidden, so which is a hard spot hidden in the 7th edition, spots cloaked movement up on a higher catwalk. Just one thing here, there are a lot of spot hidden rolls right here, just up on the catwalk here. So it might be better to change it up a bit. For example, making a listen roll to note the cloaked figure above, or possibly making the mud an automatic success. You don't need to roll for that. And then a spot hidden would reveal the pocket watch, or just have one roll for the mud and the pocket watch, and you find both. Personally, I just think many spot hidden rolls in the exact same location is a little bit repetitive. So anyway, if they decide to try and get up to the higher levels and chase the cloaked figure, they kind of follow the way, what they think it is, and it leads them to a locked door. If they get through, this is just me expanding a little bit, have them open up into an empty room that's a dead end. And as they're outside the locked door, maybe an extreme listen, or have them make a listen roll, and on a regular success they hear a mumble. There was definitely something said. On a hard success, maybe they can kind of like make out that it was like a 1 syllable or a 2 syllable word. Obviously you can make it up. And on an extreme listen success, they could hear, they can almost make it out, but have it like an ambiguous word. So it could be something like this. Don't let them get the answer, but kind of gives them a little bit of hint as to what's going on. Maybe there's a secret password or something that's needed here, and not that they know it, and without knowing it they can't use it, but they're starting to get onto the trail. Again, that's just an extra thing that I recommend adding in, so you can ignore it if you want. But that's as much as you get up on the catwalks. After that, you can head down to the stage, or if anyone is still down on the stage, because the investigators might have split up, the piece of fabric that fell out of his hand, you can find that, and it's just black satin, and it's clearly ripped from a larger piece, but that's about all you can get from it, and it doesn't really reappear later in the scenario. You can also check if you want it, especially given the information from above. You could check and see that Bouquet's shoes have no mud on them, so it wasn't his mud anyway. And around this time, the police will arrive, so led by Commissary Millefroy. He will demand statements are taken from everyone, and he gathers with the opera managers and Leroux, who he has maybe worked with before or knows, or possibly the managers have kind of like asked him to come over. Leroux can also introduce the investigators as his colleagues from England, and the commissary will look a little bit suspiciously at them, but will accept, okay, they can be part of this conversation, especially if the investigators offer any information, for example, the fabric, the mud, or the pocket watch, something like that. And again, this is one of the reasons, and there's many reasons, but this is one of the reasons why it's very important to make Gaston Leroux kind of like a bit of a friend of the investigators. So while they're discussing, while they're introducing the investigators, Madame Giry, who is the leader of the ballet troupe, she will barge over and she will insist to the commissary that it was the ghost. And she'll say, I think they say, Bouquet speaks too freely, he was unwise, and something like that. And the commissary will gently kind of pass her off to another police officer. And at hearing this, the managers will try to convince the commissary that there is no ghost. It's just a series of unfortunate incidents have been happening, culminating in this death. And the commissary will turn to Leroux and say that the police will look into the murder but can't be seen to look into anything supernatural. But he knows that Leroux kind of has a little bit of experience with the occult and stuff like that. Nothing supernatural, but strange things anyway. So if Leroux and his associates want to check out that angle, they can. And all of this seems to kind of calm down the managers, but they do ask Leroux, who is a newspaper writer, to keep any talk of ghosts out of the newspaper. And at this stage, everyone is asked to go home after giving their statements. And Leroux will separate from the investigators because he has to go write his story for Le Matin, the morning newspaper. So the next morning, the investigators will wake up and find Leroux's story in Le Matin, which avoids any talk about the ghost, as he promised, but it does say that there has already been an arrest. So Colonel Taylor's manservant, Chowdhury, was particularly mad at Bouquet for saying something disparaging about the diva, Carlotta, and the colonel had been very vocal about his dislike of Bouquet. So this is the kind of the foreshadowing that I say by meeting them in the foyer in advance. If you hadn't done that, then during kind of like when they rush backstage, they might hear something, some kind of murmuring about that, or they can talk to people to get that hint. It doesn't really matter because it'll appear in the newspaper here anyway. But I think introducing it in the foyer just makes it a little bit more natural as well. So Chowdhury is known to have been a thug, which is the organized gangs in India. The murder, in the report says, was similar to traditional thug murders, particularly in the use of a Punjab lasso, which is the knot that was used to kill Bouquet. But the players, if they can make an anthropology roll, they will get a description of what a Punjab lasso is. And a different roll, an occult roll or an anthropology roll, can also reveal that thugs use something called rumals, which was like knotted cloth, not Punjab lasso. So that might be used to kind of like convince people of his, or at least to let the investigators know that maybe it wasn't him. But of course they might not know this as well. If the investigators go to interview Chowdhury in the prison, and if they convince him to talk, he admits he used to be a thug, but gave it up for a proper job and then started working for the colonel when he was in India. And then he came back to Europe when the colonel retired. The colonel will probably be present at this and is furious at the arrest of Chowdhury. He admits that he didn't like Bouquet and that Chowdhury is very loyal, but there's no way he would have done this. It doesn't come up here, but a little bit of advice from me. If the investigators ask, say that Chowdhury briefly stepped out to use the bathroom when the attack happened. Because if he was just sitting by the colonel the whole time, then he'd probably have already been released at this stage. If they are asked about the pocket watch, they can report that it was lost the other day, but they're not sure where. They thought it was in their hotel room, but it seems to have disappeared. The colonel can accompany them back to the hotel and they can look around there, but there's nothing really to find. But asking a maid, she remembers seeing a cloaked man the previous day. She couldn't see his face as he has a high hat and a high collar, but he did greet her with a pronounced German accent. The investigators won't know it yet, but it was Eric Zahn, the viola player. So the investigators may want to go and find out different rumors about the Phantom by talking to the staff. The staff seem, worried about what's going on, but they're also, happy to gossip as well. You should provide a lot of different stories, and, some of them should be contradictory as well. There's plenty given in the scenario, but feel free to come up with your own as well. So, for example, some people think the Phantom has always been here. Others think he's relatively new. Some think he lives in the upper reaches. Others say down in the basements. Some say he has an inhuman face. Others say he has smooth smooth face and featureless face. And others say he wears a mask. You can make up as many of these as you like. But there are a few key staff members that you should talk to. Madame Giry was the woman who was standing outside box 5, and she is a woman who was very vocal about this being a ghost attack when she was talking to the police. She has actually met the Phantom, and she will, a little bit reluctantly, but she will tell you about this. And sometimes, she says, his voice sounds German, and at other times it's hollow and metallic. He always wears a cloak and a mask, so she's never seen his face. And she may also point them in the direction of Christine, who is a young singer who thinks she is visited by the Angel of Music. So, talking to Christine, she will say that the angel visits her in her dressing room and has a sweet-sounding voice and is teaching her how to sing. I might add in here, it's not written in the scenario, but I might add in here as well that it sounds a little bit Germanic. Because it's only Eric Zahn who's visiting her. If Christine is pressed, she reveals that she has seen the cloaked figure once, and she actually followed it through a secret portal. But she won't tell that to the investigator. Certainly not yet, unless later when more people start to die. But she knows how to operate the portal in her room. And again, she won't tell the investigators this yet, anyway. But if they follow up with her, she might reveal it. And again, even if they know about this, that just alerts them to the presence of the portal and how the portals work. But each individual portal has a unique keyword to get through. So, it would be fine if they found out at this stage as well. So, at some point before they leave, the investigators should be approached. And again, this is my recommendation. But they should be approached by an opera gas man. And he asks them kind of nervously if they'd like to join him for a cigarette break outside. And while they're inside the opera, he's really shifting very uncomfortably and looking all around him. But once outside, he reveals that he may know something. So Madame Giry mentioned that Bouquet had been talking too freely. And the gas man says he doesn't want to get himself into trouble. That's why they're outside. But when he heard that, it jogged his memory. Bouquet recently recounted to him a strange incident that he had years back. One night he was here, this is Bouquet, one night Bouquet was here at the Opera House late, and he noticed a strange hooded cloaked figure along with a coachman, and they carried something into the opera. Upon returning, the cloaked figure handed over what looked like a lot of francs to the coachman. The gasman says that he doesn't know who the coachman is, but Bouquet did mention that the coachman now drives for Dr. Charles Richet. So that's the link. So you know that now the coachman drives her is Charles Richet. So also while they're in the opera, if the investigators think to check people's shoes, they will find a lot of the stagehands have mud on their shoes, and that kind of directs them to the cellars. But they don't know where exactly, and the cellars are enormous and pitch black, and multi-level, so they won't really find anything. The outlier with mud on their shoes is the viola player Eric Zahn. So he has mud on his shoes, and he probably shouldn't as a member of the orchestra, like a stagehand, sure, but a member of the orchestra. And he also has a German accent. If questioned, he will say that he just took a walk on the lower levels to kind of clear his head. But as he's saying this, he does seem nervous as well. But he won't reveal anything now. And actually, many musicians can vouch for him during the time of the murder because he was right there in the middle of the orchestra. And I think this is great because at this stage, you've got a lot of things pointing towards Eric Zahn, and you might even hear a rumor that he really likes Christine or something like that. And all of this really adds up, and the German accent, the mud on the shoes, you're like, okay, it's probably him. But he was there present during the murder, so it couldn't have been him as well. And the fact that he's acting suspicious as well definitely lets them know something's up. So the scenario says that if he is threatened sufficiently at the stage, he might break down and admit to what's going on, as long as the investigators promise not to tell Christine. For me, this is a bit too simple. I don't think he would fold when he has such a solid alibi, and he didn't actually do it as well. But around this time, and this is kind of an introduction or a link between the scenes that I've added in as well that I think just makes it go a little bit more smoothly. So around this time, maybe when they're, really trying to turn the screw on Eric Zahn, but you're like, okay, this is played out as far as it's going to go. Someone comes running in shouting, a note, there's been a note from the opera ghost. The managers have it. And one of the managers is kind of like running behind this stagehand. I say, no, don't, no, there's nothing at all. No, please, everybody calm down. And he kind of like looks at his pocket watch and it's like, oh, it's time to get ready for tonight's performance. And people start kind of reluctantly moving, but there's definitely a lot of gossip going on. And so the manager looks a bit deflated at having kind of like failed to control the situation. But as he sees the investigators, he kind of like puts on a bit of an exhausted smile, and he asks them to join him in his office. So both of the managers are there, and they will show the investigators the note that they got from the opera ghost. And it reads, "My dear managers, so it is to be war between us. If you still wish for peace, you must agree to the following conditions. 1. You must send away the foreigners and leave me in peace. 2. I must continue to receive my monthly allowance. 3. My private box must be available and at my disposal for each performance. If these demands are not met, you will give Faust tonight in a house with a curse upon it. Take my advice and be warned in time. Opera Ghost." So the managers just want to let the investigators know that they give no credence to this, and they assure the investigators that they have the full support of the managers. And in fact, the managers provide tickets to the investigators for a private box and insist that they stay for appearances, if nothing else, to kind of say, oh, that's all nonsense, and look, we're not bothered by the rumors, and look, the investigators are still here. And it's pretty much time for the opera to start now, so go mingle and show everyone that you're here. If the investigators decide to stay for the opera, of course they could refuse, but and if they refuse, then they'll find out in newspaper reports the following day. But if they decide to stay for the opera tonight, they can keep an eye on Eric Zahn, and he stays in the orchestra throughout. During the performance, a spot hidden notices the chandelier, the big ornate chandelier in the center, start to sway oddly, and then moments later it crashes down into the floor, killing 6 and injuring dozens more. Nothing really can be found by investigating this, although an aggressive interrogation of Zahn might produce something, although again he was clearly in the orchestra all night. But now he is definitely starting to feel a little bit more worried about this. So he's torn between, fearing for his own life if he, betrays Cthulhu, the Eidithian, and also, not wanting to feel responsible for the death of the innocents. So anyway, you can play out that all you want, but there's not going to be much information that they get tonight. But the following day, Leroux calls in the investigators to see him and shows them a letter he received, and it reads, "My dear Monsieur Leroux, you would appear to be a wise man, unlike Messieurs Richard and Moncharmin." These are the managers. "If you wish there to be no more blood spilt at the Place de l'Opéra, you and the foreigners will immediately cease your intrusions into my work. There are things better left unknown. I do not harm those who leave me alone and wish only to be left in peace. If you do not heed my warning, the blood will be on your hands, not mine. Your most humble and obedient servant, Opera Ghost." So Leroux will ask the investigators if they want to continue and be enthusiastic if they say yes, and he will try to convince them not to give up if they are hesitant at all. Then I would say it's a good time for the investigators to share all the information that they have with Leroux. If they haven't thought of it already, but just because of the way things kind of happened in quick succession, Leroux will suggest going to see Dr. Charles Richet to find his coachman. Leroux may accompany them and distract the doctor as the investigators try to identify the coachman. But they will find him anyway, and his name is Léon Leperc, maybe. He had totally forgotten about the incident because it was years ago. But recently he was starting to have, he's been having dreams about it since the start, but recently they've kind of picked up as well. So basically what he remembers is he was offered a huge amount of money to do it, and he never saw the man's face. He had a metallic voice and wore a very wide-brimmed hat. Léon drove him to the Dôme des Invalides, which is where Napoleon is buried. And the the Phantom, basically, prayed at a grave, got back in, and Léon brought him back to the opera. So that's what he remembers anyway. If asked about helping the man carry something, Léon denies it and says he has no memory of that. But I think adding in, after a second of thinking, he thinks maybe he has a vague recollection of carrying something, maybe some kind of odd machinery of some sort, but that's all he can remember. Because Cthulhu, the Phantom, cast cloud memory on him, but it didn't work perfectly. And pretty much that's what the investigators can get there. The core clue is the Dôme des Invalides. So if the investigators then go there, it's a formal royal church, and as I mentioned, where Napoleon is buried. But there's not actually that much that they can learn. They may have picked up some clues about spring 1893, and it's currently November 1897, so 4 years later. But spring 1893 is when the reports of the Phantom started. And that's when Léon started having the dreams and some other clues throughout as well. So if the investigators ask the staff at the Dôme des Invalides about, anything strange in spring 1893, at first the staff won't remember anything because it's 4 years ago. But then they do remember the weird electrical storm, and one of their staff members, Jérôme Pelletier, was found dead. And it seems like he was struck by lightning, even though he was inside the building. So it was very strange. If the investigators check the inside of the building, an idea roll... Now, I think the idea roll is a little bit strange, but an idea roll allows them to see a slightly discolored spot on the floor. And a geology or physics roll can identify the mark as being caused by a powerful electrical surge. A spot hidden reveals a tiny object made of crystal, wire, and metal. And I would say that this should be, in a fairly hidden location, because it's something that the Phantom, it needs for his machine, and presumably he would have, come back here looking for it. So it should be well hidden, or possibly one of the staff found it and have it in the office or something like that. And then they might be willing to pass it over to the investigators, or maybe they could be bribed to give it over. It's been 4 years, no one's come looking for it, so maybe a few francs would be nice. If you make a successful electrical repair or a physics roll, you can identify it as some sort of electrical circuit, but have no idea what it's for. It's too alien to you at this stage. You can't make heads nor tails of it. So just before we go down into the cellars, you could try to squeeze Eric Zahn, but you could also leave him alone. I think it's probably a little bit better to leave it as a mystery for now and have the kind of the big reveal in the cellars. But Zahn will be more broken up after all of the innocent deaths, and he might confess more now. He will say that he didn't commit any of the atrocities, but he does know a little about what's going on. He says he's been using the portals to get around and pretend that he's the angel of music to get close to his love, Christine. He can show the investigators some of the unimportant portals and how to use them, but he won't reveal the ones that the Phantom uses. If Christine finds out, she will feel that Zan betrayed her trust and took advantage of her father's story of the Angel of Music. And in this case, Zan will be distraught. He will tell everything, including Cthulhu's location and where his important key portals are and what the keywords are. And then he will cut off his tongue and disappear, only to reappear in the short story, The Music of Eric Zahn. You could also, another way you could do it, is you could hide and wait in Christine's room to ambush the Angel of Music, who is Eric Zahn. And again, this will kind of lead to the same result. But that's pretty much all of the information you're going to find out. It's time now to just go down to the cellars and try and find your way. So everything really should be leading towards the cellars at this stage. Maybe the investigators have been here before, but as I mentioned, it's an absolute maze. Now they've hopefully got some more directions or information about secret passages. You could have, if there's not enough information kind of freely flowing, you could have the coachman say that the man had kind of wet shoes as well, or maybe even the coachman woke up the next day and his shoes were soaking, kind of indicating that they were in water at some point. And if you ask around, people will say the very lowest level of the opera house has water. So again, that's just giving you a little bit of information where you need to go. But anyway, as you go into the cellars, they are in total darkness, so it's very easy to get lost, and you probably need a light source. Throughout your time in the cellars, you'll start to catch little bits of music getting stronger as you go deeper. It's not too loud, and it's more of a vibration, and as you get deeper and deeper, you hear it a little bit more clearly, and it's more unsettling because you start to realize that it's not music. You can't really identify what it is. As you're going deeper as well, there is an optional encounter with the rat catcher. It doesn't have that much to do with the scenario, but a pack of rats running at you in the dark can be pretty unsettling. I won't detail it here, and you can add it in or take it out. I don't think it really makes much of a difference to the story. So as you get down to the lowest level, you will reach a lake. Or rather, this level is mostly submerged. It's clear at this stage that the music is coming somewhere over on the far side, but the water is icy cold. Investigators should really try to get a boat, something like that for this crossing. If they do, they just have to crouch down on the boat because the water is almost up to the ceiling. Then they just paddle around in the water until they see the light coming from the Phantom's lair. If they decide to swim, it is a terrible idea as the water is freezing cold. They might be able to test the waters, and a swim roll would reveal that it would be a very dangerous idea to try traversing it by swimming. There are rules given here for if they do want to swim, but it is brutal and probably at least some of your investigators will probably die. Swimming also means abandoning your source of light, and so it plunges you into darkness, making everything more difficult. So not only are you swimming in the freezing cold water, there's no light, you don't know where you're going, and there's also a dangerous undertow threatening to drag you down. So the bottom line is, don't swim. So either way, in a boat, hopefully, or swimming, once you see the light from the Phantom's lair, you can start to go over there. You can notice the music getting stronger and stronger. And as you arrive, there are 2 rowboats tied up here. I'm not sure why, as both Cthulhu and Zan can use portals to get here. But anyway, You'll come into the main chamber filled with hundreds of candles and some old oriental rugs and tapestries. So who is here depends on what has happened so far, so I will just describe the room first. There is a weird glowing metal device up against one wall, and this is the Yadithian light envelope, and it seems to be emitting the music. It's mostly smooth, but a spot hidden roll reveals a small depression, and a mechanical or electrical repair will let you know how to open it. Inside, despite the small external appearance of it, inside opens up to be the size of a small room full of strange machinery and glowing crystals. No matter how hard you try, you cannot figure out how it works. It's just too alien. However, an idea roll does point out that it seems to be in a state of disrepair. If you pull back the oriental rugs, they will reveal a trapdoor with stairs going down, and this leads to a room full of black powder, which is pretty much like gunpowder but a little bit weaker. And this has been left over from various revolutions. Behind one of the tapestries is a small room with a coffin on a table and lots of phantom costumes. Another tapestry hides a torture chamber, and again this is actually from previous rebellions, and various levers on the outside can make the temperature lethally hot. So that's basically what the lair is like. But what happens when they arrive depends on how they've come here. If you've come here by chasing Zan, so for example, if you tried to ambush him while he was talking to Christine, then as you and Zan come back in, Cthulhu, the Yadithian, will immediately cast Flesh Ward on himself, which takes 5 rounds to cast. He will then tell Zan to delay the investigators, as Cthulhu basically just tries to escape in his lightwave envelope. If Zan had a bit of a head start on the investigators, then Cthulhu already has his Flesh Ward up and will cast Pipes of Madness. If he has a chance to stop and or kill the investigators, he will, but he won't risk his life and he will flee if necessary. Alternatively, if you arrived here by chasing Taubo himself, possibly by waiting for him in the catwalk or in box 5, then Zan is already in the chamber waiting, unless, you've already taken care of him somehow. Cthulhu will then order Zan to delay the investigators while Cthulhu tries to escape in the light wave envelope. If the investigators arrived unannounced by boat or swimming, or possibly by figuring out some of the secret passages, and without having confronted Zan, then when they arrive, there will be a cloaked figure bent over a desk working intently on writing music, and it's Eric Zan. If unmasked, he will explain why he did what he did for Christine and say he had nothing to do with the murders. He can then also explain to the investigators that the Phantom just wants to repair his machine and leave. He only kills those who threaten to expose him. Although Zan is also clearly uncomfortable about the chandelier murders because those people weren't trying to expose him. As this is going on, Cthulhu returns to the secret lair through his portal. So as the investigators are talking to Zan, and Cthulhu will notice this and he will cast Flesh Ward on himself in peace while the others discuss matters. So then when he comes out, he will already have his Flesh Ward on. Cthulhu really just wants to try and escape, and he will abandon Zan if necessary. If he's up against a single opponent, he will try to cast Mesmerize, and if it's a group, he'll use Pipes of Madness. So Cthulhu's motivation is to, if it's very easy for him, he will just dispose of anyone who comes in because he wants to keep this his hiding place. If it looks in any way that he's going to be injured or attacked, he will flee in his lightwave envelope. So if Cthulhu gets to his machine, he sets a weird vibration setting on it that sends agonizing waves through the bodies of the investigators, and as this happens, Eric Zan's tongue ruptures and just falls off. The lair starts to crumble and collapse, so you have to get out of there. So basically, the Phantom will pretty much get away at this stage and will probably be gone forever, although he could return as an antagonist in later scenarios, especially if the players still have his missing piece from the Lightwave envelope. And that's the scenario. I love the idea. Using the Phantom as a background is nice, but at certain areas I feel like the scenario's hands were tied a little bit too much to match the story elements from the Phantom of the Opera. There are a few things that don't make sense. Like, why did the Phantom go to such lengths to frame Chowdhury? Especially as he was trying to send a message to people to back off from investigating the Phantom. Like, he sent Eric Zahn to steal the pocket watch, and presumably the Phantom made that very specific Punjab lasso as well. So I don't know why he was doing that exactly. Also, this scenario has pretty much nothing to do with the Golden Dawn, apart from just the initial setup. This is fine, but it is a departure from the rest of the scenarios in the book, and it feels a little bit disjointed. The biggest problem in my mind is the wasted opportunity here. So basically, you have two Phantoms, and you've got seemingly impossible appearances and disappearances. If I were writing it, I would have a series of things going on. So here, it's just maybe a little bit too short. But I would have a series of bad events happening, and all of them point towards Zahn being the Phantom. But then there should be something that really proves that he's not the Phantom, because he was in plain sight all along. So in this one, they kind of do that, but I feel like it's a little bit rushed. Because, like, in the very first one, you know, everyone can vouch he was there the whole time. I would have it maybe a little bit more suspicious the first couple of times, and maybe even he gets arrested or something like that, and then it's proof that he couldn't have done it. I also think there should be more chase scenes where the players get to a dead end and the Phantom has disappeared. I think it would also be great for them to, after a few of these, to figure out the portals. So, for example, if they're waiting in box 5, and then when the Phantom escapes through the portal saying the word, the investigators can say it and notice the portal and follow that too. And then they can start a chase. But then when they get to the next portal, maybe they think it's the same password, but it's a new password, so they can't get through. And that can really build up a little bit of frustration with the players, but that's really motivating them. They really want to find this Phantom, and they've been so close before. It also means that when you get to the finale, they will be doing everything they can to make sure he can't just get away. It's not an option in the scenario for the players to bargain with the missing piece of the machine. And I think that would be a very natural reaction. Especially if you hear from Zahn that the Yedithian is just trying to repair his machine and get out there, and you're like, well, we found something that might be, an important part. So maybe the investigators can come up with that and offer to give him that piece if he promises never to return, or potentially in exchange for some deep knowledge or some spells maybe. And then the investigators can return to the opera house and say that the ghost has been exorcised from the building and will not bother anyone again. I think as it's written, the ending can be really unsatisfying for the players if Cthulhu just escapes, and everything's written as if he's almost definitely going to escape. So the investigators won't know where he is, or that the scenario is really over. They don't know anything really about Cthulhu either, except possibly the little that can be gained from Eric Zahn. But just be careful, there's a few instances where Eric Zahn might have his tongue removed or cut off himself. So make sure that any information that you want to give to the players that they have before he cuts off his tongue. If you're running this and you've taken my advice from just now to have moments of like near misses and a little bit of building up that frustration among the players for trying to catch something so elusive, then I would strongly advise not just letting him escape easily. Like, yeah, maybe he escapes, but I think that would be a very unsatisfying end for the players if they're, taking some measures to make sure he doesn't escape. Then maybe he doesn't escape. Okay, so that is pretty much it. It's a good scenario, and it has some great ideas. But I think to truly flesh it out and make the most of the ideas, you do need to add in some more scenes and build up that suspicion a little bit more. And finally, there should definitely be a way for the players to find out what's going on. They won't necessarily find it, but if they're going looking for the information, I think there should be a way for them to understand a little bit about it and maybe increase their Cthulhu mythos skill a little bit as well. So that is the third and penultimate scenario in the Golden Dawn sourcebook. Up next, we will look at the final one, Shilanagig, or possibly Shilanagi. I'll get into the pronunciation a little bit later. Oh, well, in the next video. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I would love it if you shared it too, but please only share it with other keepers. We want to keep these surprises for the players. Thank you so much to everyone who's been watching my videos and who's subscribed. It's great to know that people are watching and enjoying these videos. All right, so I will see you next time. Have a great day. Bye.